Well, my next guest has spent a lifetime as an actor, appearing in about 70 to 80 movies. Indeed, there was a time when no British movie was complete without him. In more recent years, he's been preoccupied with making documentary films for television. His style is quite unique, for not only does he write and direct his films, he also plays most of the acting roles, and is, as someone once said of him, and I quote, magnificently and enjoyably biased. He's had his work banned by television companies, and he's split the critics into those who think he's a master filmmaker and those who think he's decidedly odd. He remains unrepentant. He once said, I trust I will never stoop so low as to be objective about anything I do. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenneth Griffith.
Is this Superman?
No, that's not Superman. No, indeed. He wishes it was Superman. Come on. We're talking there about Oxbridge. In fact, you started your career at Cambridge, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I have my eldest son in the audience and my next eldest son, and this is the first time they've ever heard it. I started in an ironmonger's shop at the age of 15 and a half in Cambridge.
An ironmonger's shop?
Yes, an ironmonger's
It's not quite like the university, is it?
No, it isn't. It isn't. One thing, you said, Michael, that I direct my films. I have two, but since my director I know is watching tonight, Michael Pearce, a remarkably talented director, I didn't direct Tom Paine or the one before that.
You're right, but you certainly have directed some.
I have two of them.
Two of them?
Yes.
Right. But it is very much the way you have a making documentary. It is very much a one-man job, basically, isn't it?
Yes, yes, I research them. They're my enthusiasms initially, and I research them. I've got into trouble with the ACTT by refusing to use a researcher because I'm answerable. I've just read an editorial in the Telegraph today.
About you, sir?
About me, yes.
Really?
Not very complimentary either,
Was
yes.
it not?
No, it was not. I mean, so I am answerable. I mean, if the editor criticizes me for saying that Tom Paine was a very good man, yes, I decided he was a good man and no researcher told me.
I see. Fine. So it's all on your own shoulders.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
But we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's first of all look a little bit for a while at your career. You made 70 to 80 movies, as I said. You had no formal training in the theatre at all, did you?
None at all, no.
Who was the person who influenced you most as a young actor?
Well, first of all, I must say that when I was a schoolboy in Southwest Wales, I really didn't know what to do. I was an academic disaster, that's the truth. And also we were very poor, so at the age of 15 I had to leave the grammar school. Incidentally, I got into the grammar school, it was thought by a clerical error. My master at school and the headmaster thought it was a clerical error. I could never have got into the grammar school, and I rather agreed with them. But I got into the grammar school, and I had a very remarkable English literature mistress who has just written to me. She's in Cardiff, and for Tom Paine, she gave me 10 out of 10.
She did.
She
Still
did,
marking
yeah.
you.
Yes, she did. And when we did Shakespeare in the class, she gave us the parts to read. And that was the one thing that I could do. So she put me into a play about Richard II called Richard of Bordeaux. And the local critic wrote, "If this boy chooses to make the stage a career," which gave me the idea. I'd never seen a theater. I'd never seen an actor. The only thing I could think of was to join the army as a private, and they would give me a uniform and they'd feed me, and I felt I might see India. I can remember that. And I did have an aunt who suggested I went into the local Boots the chemist or became a bank clerk, which was quite beyond my ability, and that frightened me very badly. But when I saw, if this boy chooses to make the stage a career, that gave me the idea. I was in an ironmonger's shop in Cambridge, and that was the first theatre building I'd ever seen. And I went to the stage door at the age of 15 and a half with my school notices from Richard of Bordeaux, asked for the producer, a man named Peter Hoare, And he gave me an audition. He asked me, I did Richard of Bordeaux, I did some of Henry V, and he asked me if I'd come back the next day and do it again. What he hadn't told me, he had the entire company assembled in the gallery, and he gave me a job, paid me £3 a week. So the first, which was plenty to live on then.
Yes,
so the first time I ever went into a theatre building, I was a professional actor.
Yes. What about, in the early 50s, you were voted, along with Montgomery Clift, as the young actor most likely to be famous.
Yes.
He went on to superstardom. You didn't. Why was that?
Well, I remember who showed me that. It was Mrs. Roy Bolting of the time, who was very, very kind to me, and she showed me Harper's Bazaar. And I saw it, that I had been voted in America with Montgomery Clift, the two young actors most likely to be famous. Well, I suppose, you know, about 27, 28 years ago, I was doing a play, I'm answering your question, by James Forsyth for television. And I played the devil. He was a sort of teddy boy, the leader of a teddy boy gang. But in James's plays, they were all moralities. They were about good and evil. And so the leader of this teddy boy gang, I played, and he was the devil. And I had a gang of 10 young men. And for the first 3 days, there were only 9. And I turned to another actor, the greatest Shakespearean clown I've ever seen, George Rose, who now resides in America. And I said to George, I said, because these 9 young men were spending their time, very nice young men. Some of them have survived. I saw one of their names on a playbill today, starring. And I said to, because when they weren't actually rehearsing their bits, they were either talking about the next telejob, because television had gone, or they were in an adjoining room at a pinball machine. And I turned to George, and it was the first time I ever spoke like an old actor. I said, George, what is happening to our profession? To which George, though it's 27 years ago, said, don't ask me, darling. And then I was very worried about the one who was missing, because I had a small scene with him. And he had a little scene on his own. So I turned to the director, whose name is Peter Zadek, a distinguished director in Germany today, film and television and theater director. And I said, Peter, where's this other chap? He said, I don't know, but the rumor is that he's coming this afternoon. He's just disappeared. Now, we were rehearsing in an Irish club. And we rehearsed in the well where they danced, and the entrance were 2 swing doors. Now, I was in the middle of rehearsal. I was the leading actor. Suddenly, the 2 swing doors opened, and there was a young tramp, 6'2", and he announced, he said, I'm sorry I'm late, darlings. Came down the steps, looked at me, picked me up, kissed me. I can't tell you exactly what he said because you wouldn't allow it, but he said, I think you are something marvelous. Put me down and retreated to a corner. It was Peter O'Toole. Now, Peter O'Toole then told me, well, when we went to record this play, it was up in Manchester. When I did this little scene with him, it was the most formidable competition I had ever met in my life as an actor. He was word perfect, this tramp, this young tramp, and he was devastating. When we went up to Manchester, I went into my dressing room, which was dressing room number 1, and as a matter of passing fact, on the seat was a banjo or a ukulele. I went out to the floor manager and I said, there's a musical instrument on my seat. He said, oh yes, it belongs to Mr. Formby. I said, George? He said, yes. I said, leave it there so that I can pay my respects, which I did. He came in, so I met George Formby. And then I went out to the same floor manager, and I said, where does that young man O'Toole dress? He said, he's on the 4th floor, in the big dressing room with the other 9 young men. I said, will you ask him to join me in dressing room number 1, where he belongs? Toole promptly came down, no saying, oh, I can't do this. He simply said, again, I can't quote him, which something half are you having of the dressing table?
No.
Well, to come
To answer my
your
question, yes.
O'Toole finally, after much struggling, got his first film part in a feature film. It was at Pinewood. It was called The Savage Innocents. Now, by this time, he was living with me in a little Muse box, as he calls it. A Muse box, that's what he calls it. And it was the very first day he ever had on a feature film. I was also working at Beaconsfield on a film. And I knew that he had to get up much earlier than I because he wore a beard in it, which had to be put on his face. So I got up. I was very busy, 6 o'clock in the morning, but I felt he hadn't gone. And when I was leaving this little place, the phone rang, and it was the production office at Pinewood. And they said, we're very worried. Did Mr. O'Toole leave on time? So I told a lie. I said, well, this is a very large place. I'll try and find him. In actual fact, it was a box. So I went out of the door into his little room, and he was fast asleep. Now, this was his first day on a feature film, 26 years ago or so. Can you imagine? And he said, I've forgotten to tell you something.
No.
Because he showed me his contract. And he showed me his contract, and again, I can't quote him because we're on television. He said, look at that, mate. He said 2,500 something quid. You know what the something is, don't you? Mm-hmm. 2,500 something thousand. Don't ask me.
I don't know what it is.
2,500 something
It's to
quid.
do with sex and travel.
So I was very impressed. I was very impressed, and then he also pointed to another clause in his contract which said, he said, look at that, mate, car supplied. And in parenthesis was, when available. Now, I didn't point this out to him. So, when I went in to wake him, I said, O'Toole, it's Pinewood Production Office. It's 30 miles away. You should have been there half an hour ago. He said, has my car come, love? And I said, no. He said, be a darling. Tell them, no car, no me. They immediately sent round a Rolls Royce with a chauffeur and someone to see him into the car, and from that day to this, he has had a Rolls Royce and a chauffeur collect him. I never behaved like that, and that is why I think I'm not a superstar.
You have just broken the record previously held by Kenneth Williams for the longest reply to a question on the show. And you have not only broken it, you have smashed it to smithereens.
Yes.
Let's, in the few remaining minutes we've got left, let's talk about what you became during this course as an actor. There's this very controversial filmmaker. You make films about your passions, about things that really, really interest you and you feel deeply about. And your films are the opposite of objective. They are very subjective statements about people. Does the criticism that you've had, does it upset you?
Well, I have just read about 250 letters, and I've had excessive praise, which is traumatic. The things that are said about me which are unkind are also traumatic. Clive James, incidentally, doesn't count.
Why doesn't Clive?
Well, Clive James doesn't count because on Start the Week, which I was on once, I called him a bad pornographer. Every week, once a Sunday, In the Sunday Observer, I said he's guilty of bad pornography. I don't mean sex. You don't have to, a pornographer doesn't have to, in destroying other people's careers, in my opinion, my humble opinion, to advance his own. I don't like him. Now, before that, before that, he'd given me good notices. The worst he'd ever given me was, Kenneth Griffith is compulsive viewing, dash, but so is a cobra. I didn't mind that. But from that day, afterwards, from my next, he does his best, including last Sunday, to wipe me off the face of the earth.
I think that's unfair, Kenneth.
Please?
From the point of view that, I mean, he did say at the end of that, but he's his own man. I mean, I think you're probably slightly overreacting.
Paranoid is the word.
I think paranoid is the word yes. And would it
Where
not
is,
be...
I'm sorry, Clive, where is the...
I'm not about to make a defense of any television
Yes.
critic, because God knows I've been trampled on by them enough, and at times I'd have a whiff of your paranoia. But I think that you can probably sort of overreact to them, and it's really, do they have, as
No,
you
he's
said,
the only one.
but do they have, as you said, the power to wreck careers? I doubt
No,
that.
no, they haven't. Otherwise, I wouldn't be...
Because they write after the event, you see.
Yes, I
So
know,
it doesn't
but
matter.
it's the next one, isn't it? And you see, but on the other hand, Michael, if you let me get a word in edgeways... Michael, on the other hand, the support that I get from the press is so... You know, I think that they bend over backwards to help me. The rest... The only criticism I have is Mr. James, and since you pointed out to me, in spite of him calling me that balding taff in his reviews, I'm sorry, Clive. I was unjust and unfair. Where's that camera?
But do you think that in fact, that television executives take notice of television critics?
Yes, the lesser ones.
Yes.
But unfortunately, we're running out of good ones. And therefore, the lesser ones, one controller, I better not be specific. Well, he came from Wales. Controller of BBC Wales, Geraint Stanley Jones, did say to me, he did say to me a few weeks ago, isn't it sad that someone has to tell them that it's good? Incidentally, on the subject of Wales, I would like to say that the one patch I have now to make these programs is BBC Wales. And they have been made by the drama department of BBC Wales. I've got to say this because John Hevin, my producer, is in the audience, and I would never make another one if I didn't say that.
Well, but what about the thing about the future prospects of work in this country? Because you seem to think that it's a kind of battlefield for you here. I mean, and you can't be comfortable working in a battlefield. Have you had offers to go abroad to work?
Well, it is. It's not only a battlefield for me here. The battle is over.
Why?
I mean, virtually there is no place now where I can make the films.
You're still
except in America.
But you're still making
no.
films.
If I say to you that, say, Channel 4, the channel for the independence, and the brave new channel, I was received by their controller, Jeremy Isaacs, who said how much we need you here, and various programs were agreed to, and agreed to verbally, you understand, and a series. A week later, he phoned my friend and partner, David Swift, who was with me at this meeting, and said, I have to tell you, David, that there is formidable opposition to Kenneth's presence here. And he said, I'm going to look into it a little deeper, but prepare for the worst. A week later, he said, he can't come here for the time being, at least.
But will you go to America?
Well, America, yes. The irony is that I've got warm urgings to go to CBS in America or the great television pirate Ted Turner in Atlanta, Georgia. And when I say that, I must smile when I say it, because just before we went on the air, the great managing director of BBC Television, once upon a time, Hugh Weldon, phoned me up and say, if you're asked that question, Kenneth, smile when you say you're going to America. He did say I could add that I resent going, which I do bitterly.
Kenneth Griffith, thank you very much indeed. Kenneth Griffith. So you didn't smile enough.